I never imagined I'd be sleeping in my car one day, but that's exactly where I found myself, curled up in the back seat of my rusty old sedan, hugging a duffel bag of clothes like it was some kind of safety blanket. Why? Because my own family, my mother, my brother, and his wife, told me to get out. They didn't ask. They didn't sit me down for a conversation. They just told me, coldly and without a shred of hesitation, you need to leave. This house isn't yours. It started quietly, almost subtly. I had moved back home after college to help take care of my father when his health started to decline. At first, it made sense. Dad needed support, and I had just started working as a freelance engineer from home. I paid most of the bills. I handled his medications. I drove him to appointments. I even did the cooking and cleaning, because Mom never really had the patience. But no one said thank you. They treated it like it was expected of me, like it was my role to sacrifice everything because I was single, childless, and working remotely. My mother constantly compared me to my brother Scott, who had a real job in a big corporate office and a wife who wore designer heels and posted Das blessed family photos on Instagram every weekend. Then one day, Scott and his wife Lauren moved in. They said it was temporary while their new house was under renovation. My mother was thrilled. Finally, she said, this house will feel full again. That's when everything shifted. Suddenly, I wasn't part of the family anymore. I was the problem. Lauren criticized everything I did. I made breakfast. Why didn't you use fresh herbs? I folded the laundry. You wrinkled Scott's shirts. I tried to work. Must be nice not having a real job. My mother started siding with her. Scott stayed quiet. And then, one afternoon, they sat me down and told me straight-faced, you need to leave. You've had enough time here. It's not fair to us anymore. No mention of the bills I'd paid, no acknowledgement of the groceries I bought, nothing. I tried to reason with them, but they shut me down with the kind of fake concern that felt more like an insult than compassion. We're doing what's best for everyone, they said. Everyone but me. I packed my bags in silence and walked out the front door without a single hug or goodbye. I had nowhere to go, no apartment lined up, and barely enough in savings after helping with Dad's hospital bills. But even as I sat in my car that first night, freezing under a thin blanket and wondering how the hell I got here, something inside me shifted. They didn't want me. Fine. But someday, they'd wish they had treated me better, and that day would come sooner than they ever expected. Sleeping in my car became my new reality. The first few nights were the hardest, trying to find a safe parking lot, waking up stiff and sore, brushing my teeth in a gas station restroom while avoiding stairs. I cried, a lot, not just from fear or discomfort, but from betrayal. I had given everything to that house, my time, my money, my energy, and in return, I was tossed out like a piece of trash once I was no longer useful. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom. There's nowhere to go but up, and I was determined to rise. I got a spot at a local co-working center using the last of my emergency savings. It was small, noisy, but it had Wi-Fi and coffee. More importantly, it gave me a reason to wake up and get dressed every day. My freelance engineering work became my lifeline. I hustled harder than I ever had before, pitching to companies, bidding for projects, staying up all night designing systems and prototypes for clients overseas. Within 2 months, I landed my first big contract with a green energy startup. It paid enough to get me into a shared studio apartment. A dump, honestly. Creaky floors, thin walls, and a neighbor who played heavy metal at 2 a.m. But it was mine. I cried the first night I slept in a real bed again. I slowly started to rebuild. The loneliness still crept in at night, especially when I saw happy families walking past my window or heard coworkers talk about their weekend barbecues. But I reminded myself, I didn't need people who only loved me when I was useful. I needed people who saw my worth even when I had nothing. Funny enough, the turning point came because of that same green energy startup. They loved my work so much they referred me to a large commercial firm looking for a systems consultant. That led to another contract, and then another. Within 6 months, I was making more than I ever had before, working from my laptop on my own terms. I reinvested every cent I could, took online business courses at night, learned about passive income. By month 9, I had registered my own engineering consultancy. It wasn't huge, but it was real. It was mine. And then one evening I got the call. Hey, Rachel? It was Scott, my golden boy brother. His voice was quiet, nervous. Whoa, hey, I said flatly, unsure whether I should even answer. Look, I know it's been a while, I wanted to check in. Check in? Now? I didn't respond. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then he blurted out, Lauren lost her job. I've been laid off. We're behind on the mortgage. My heart didn't soften, not even a little. Oh, I said, keeping my voice even. I'm sorry to hear that. Another pause. Listen, Mom's freaking out. She said your old credit card isn't working anymore? The one she was using? I almost laughed. She thought she was still using my money? That account had been closed the day I walked out. Well, I guess you guys will have to figure that out, I said calmly. You're not gonna help? His voice cracked just slightly. I could hear Lauren in the background. Did she say yes? Tell her we'll pay her back. Eventually. I stared at the ceiling of my tiny apartment, lit by the soft glow of my success, the framed certificate of my new business on the wall, the client thank you cards pinned beside it. No, Scott, I said, I'm not going to help, because when I needed help, you all turned your backs on me. Click. I ended the call before he could respond. And for the first time in a long time, I slept like a baby. The next few weeks were strangely quiet. No calls, no texts, just blissful silence. But I knew my family well. They weren't done yet, not when they'd built their lives on the foundation of my support. Sure enough, the next phone call came from Mom. She didn't even say hello. Rachel, what's going on with the money? I tried to buy groceries and the card was declined. Your brother says you're being selfish. I stared at my phone in disbelief. No apology, no acknowledgement of what they had done. Just demands, as if nothing had changed. Mom, I said calmly, I haven't lived there for almost a year. That card was linked to my income. You kicked me out, remember? There was a pause on the other end. You know we were just under a lot of pressure, she said weakly. We didn't mean to hurt you, but family sticks together. You can't just abandon us. The hypocrisy stung. They had tossed me out without a second thought. But now, when the walls were closing in, they wanted to rewrite history. I'm not abandoning anyone, I replied. I'm just done being used. Click. I ended the call. The next few days, the calls turned into voicemails, then emails, then a message from my cousin. Apparently, Scott and Lauren were falling behind on bills. My mom had started selling her jewelry. They even borrowed money from a church member, promising to pay them back once they sorted things out. But things weren't getting sorted. They were spiraling. Then one evening, I got a text from Lauren. You've made your point. We're sorry. Can we meet? Part of me wanted to ignore it, but another part, one I didn't want to admit existed, was curious. So I agreed to meet at a local diner. When I walked in, I barely recognized them. Lauren looked exhausted. Her makeup was gone, replaced with deep lines of stress. Scott sat slouched, his once pristine polo shirt now wrinkled and stained. They stood when they saw me, but I didn't offer a hug. I slid into the booth and waited. Lauren started. Look, Rachel, we screwed up. We know what we did to you. It wasn't right. Scott nodded. We didn't see it back then. We thought you were just hiding behind your laptop all day. We didn't realize you were actually carrying everything. And now that I'm gone, everything's falling apart, I said. Lauren didn't argue. We're about to lose the house, she whispered. We can't even afford rent on a studio apartment in this area. Your mom is blaming us. Your dad won't talk to her anymore. He says we ruined everything. I sipped my coffee slowly, letting the silence stretch. And what do you want from me? I finally asked. We're not asking for money, Scott said quickly. I need guidance, a plan. You built something from nothing. We can't even keep our heads above water. That hit me harder than I expected. For the first time, they weren't mocking me. They weren't demanding. They were humbled. I studied their faces. Maybe karma was real. Or maybe life just had a way of bringing things full circle. I'll think about it, I said at last, but I'm not jumping back into the fire. If I help, it's on my terms, no expectations, no entitlement. They both nodded too quickly. "We'll do whatever you say," Lauren whispered. And that's when I realized something. The balance of power had shifted. The black sheep of the family had become the anchor they were clinging to. But was I ready to help them again? That I wasn't sure of yet. After that meeting at the diner, I didn't rush into anything. For the first time in my life, I had the power to choose how I wanted to respond to my family. Not out of guilt, not from obligation, but from clarity. Still, I couldn't deny the pull of something deeper. Despite everything they had done, a part of me still wanted to help, but not like before. If I were to do this, it would have to be different. Completely different. The next week, I met with my financial advisor. We went through everything I'd earned and saved in the past year. It was more than I ever imagined. My freelance contracts had turned into long-term clients, and I'd even hired a virtual assistant to help manage my growing workload. "I'm proud of you," my advisor said, "but if you're going to get involved with your family again financially, we need boundaries, strong ones." Boundaries, the one thing I never had with them. That evening, I made a plan, not a bailout, but a roadmap. The next morning, I invited Scott and Lauren to a co-working space I rented downtown. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine, a symbol of how far I'd come. They arrived, hesitant and quiet. I didn't offer coffee. I didn't make small talk. "I'm willing to help," I said, "but not the way you expect." I handed them each a binder. Inside were worksheets, checklists, budgeting tools, things I had created over time to get my own life in order. "This isn't money. This is a system," I said. "You want your life back? Then you need to learn how to build it yourselves." Scott opened the binder and blinked. "This is a business plan?" "No," I said. "This is your plan. You told me you were willing to do whatever it takes, so prove it." Lauren glanced at me. "So no money?" "Nope," I said flatly. "Not a dollar, but I will coach you, just like I would any client. You'll get access to my tools, my time, my strategies. But if you don't follow through, it's done." There was a long silence. Then Scott nodded. "Okay, fair." Lauren swallowed hard. We deserved that. For the next few weeks, they came in every Monday and Friday. I set strict deadlines, weekly progress reports, budget tracking, debt reduction strategies. I treated them like strangers, not out of coldness, but professionalism. To my surprise, they showed up, every single time. At first, it was rough. They argued with each other, blamed outside circumstances, tried to shortcut the work. But I stayed firm, and eventually they started changing. Lauren applied for jobs outside her comfort zone and landed one at a local logistics firm. Scott picked up weekend shifts doing warehouse work while taking online certifications in project management. They stopped eating out, sold the designer handbags, cut back on subscriptions, traded excuses for effort, and slowly they got better. One Friday afternoon, after our regular session, Scott lingered behind while Lauren left to pick up groceries. He looked nervous. "I found something," he said, "a job posting. It's a junior operations manager role. Pays well, full benefits. I think I'm ready." He handed me the printed listing and I scanned it. It was perfect for someone with hustle and potential. Not glamorous, but solid. "You are ready," I said. "Go for it." He looked relieved. "Thanks, Rachel. I don't think I ever told you, but I admire what you've done. You've built something from scratch. I used to think what you did wasn't real work. I was wrong." For the first time, his words sounded genuine. No sarcasm, no entitlement, just respect. Later that evening, I sat alone on my balcony. The sun was setting over the city skyline, casting a golden glow across the buildings. I thought about how far things had come in just a year. I had gone from being the family scapegoat to their blueprint for survival. And I didn't do it by yelling. I did it by drawing a line and sticking to it. But I wasn't done yet, because if I could help them find their way back, maybe there was still hope for one more person, my mom. Helping Scott and Lauren had been challenging, but not impossible. They showed effort, they took responsibility, and most importantly, they finally started to treat me like a human being, not a backup plan. But my mother? That was an entirely different mountain to climb. For months after I left the house, she hadn't contacted me once, not even when she found out I had taken control of Dad's finances. Even when Scott told her I was the one helping them get back on their feet, she remained silent. No apology, no recognition, just silence. But now, things were changing. It started with a letter. A real handwritten letter slipped into my mailbox. No return address. Just my name in her familiar cursive. Inside, the letter was short. Rachel, I heard you've been helping Scott and Lauren. I've also heard you're doing well. I know I haven't been fair to you. I don't expect forgiveness. But I hope you might consider visiting. Mom. I stared at those few lines for what felt like hours. Part of me wanted to crumple it up, toss it in the trash, and never look back. But another part, the part that still remembered the good days, the days before everything went sour, wanted to go. So after 3 days of debating, I drove to my childhood home. It looked smaller than I remembered, more worn down. The garden had weeds, the mailbox was leaning. It didn't feel like the place I grew up anymore. It felt tired. I knocked. When the door opened, she was standing there. My mother, the woman who had once told me I was lazy, ungrateful, dramatic. The woman who told me to find a new place like I was nothing more than a guest overstaying her welcome. But this time, she didn't have judgment in her eyes. She looked old, softer, unsure. "Hi," I said. "Hi," she replied, then stepped aside to let me in. The house was quiet. No TV, no chatter, no arguments, just silence. We sat in the living room, the same spot where so many of our fights had started. But this time, no one raised their voice. No one stormed out. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. I nodded. There was a long pause before she spoke again. "I didn't understand what you were doing, Rachel. I thought, because you didn't work a normal job, you were just making excuses. And then when you started sending money, I convinced myself it was your way of making up for not having a real career." I looked at her, unsure what to say. But when everything fell apart, after your dad stopped contributing, after Scott lost his job, I saw it clearly. You were the only one holding everything together, and I pushed you out. She blinked, looking away, her voice trembling now. "I don't blame you if you hate me. I would." I stayed quiet for a moment. Then, finally, I asked the question that had haunted me for over a year. "Why? Why did you treat me like that? Why was I never enough?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I don't know," she whispered. "Maybe I was jealous. You were always so independent, so different. I thought if I pushed you harder, you'd change. You'd become more like me." She laughed softly, bitterly. "But you were better than me. And instead of being proud, I made you feel small." The room went still. A part of me had waited so long to hear those words. An apology. Not perfect, not eloquent, but real. And for the first time, I saw my mother not as a villain, but as a flawed, scared person who had made terrible choices. "I don't hate you," I said. She looked at me, surprised. "But I don't trust you. Not yet. Maybe not ever the way I used to." She nodded slowly. "That's fair." "I'm not here to fix everything," I added. "I'm not coming back to live here. I've built something for myself, and I'm not giving that up. I understand. But if you want to have a relationship with me, it'll be on my terms." Tears slid down her face, and for the first time in years, I saw something real in her expression. Remorse. "Okay," she whispered, "on your terms." We sat there in silence, the weight of years finally acknowledged between us. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew this. This moment, right here, was the first brick in rebuilding something broken, and it would be my decision whether or not to keep building. After that day with Mom, I didn't expect miracles. We didn't suddenly become close. She didn't magically transform into the nurturing parent I had always wanted, but there was effort, real effort. She started calling once a week, just to check in. Not to ask for money, not to criticize, just to talk. It was awkward at first, polite, distant, but slowly the walls began to crack. She even visited me once at my apartment. She looked around and said, "I didn't think you'd be doing this well." It wasn't quite a compliment, but coming from her, it felt like one. Meanwhile, Scott and Lauren had turned a corner. They'd found a modest apartment and both landed new jobs. Scott called me sometimes just to talk, and Lauren, shockingly, sent me a thank you card. A real, handwritten one. I kept it. As for Dad, he was still living on his own. Peaceful, quiet. We shared coffee every Sunday. Those mornings became the anchor to my week. He'd tell me old stories, ask about my projects, and always remind me, "You did the right thing, Rachel. Don't ever doubt that." And I didn't, because something had shifted deep within me. I had always been the invisible one, the quiet one, the misunderstood one. But now I was the one they turned to when things fell apart. Not because I wanted revenge, not because I needed validation, but because I had finally built something of my own, and no one could take it from me again. A few months later, I got invited to a family reunion. It was being hosted by an aunt I barely knew, but the whole extended family would be there. Mom, Scott, cousins, even people who hadn't spoken to me in years. My first instinct was to decline. But then I thought, maybe it was time they saw the real me, the me they had ignored, dismissed, and labeled the black sheep. So I went. I wore a simple dress, nothing flashy. I brought a homemade pie. I smiled politely, and the moment I walked in, the room got quieter. I saw the stares, I saw the curiosity, the whispers, and I smiled to myself. Because I knew what they were thinking. Wasn't that Rachel, the one who lived in her parents' house forever? Didn't she get kicked out? Isn't she the one who worked some internet job? And yet, here I was, calm, composed, confident. People started to approach me, they asked questions, real questions. "What do you do again?" "You're still freelancing, right?" "Wow, that sounds impressive." Some of them even apologized for how they used to treat me. "I guess we didn't understand what you were really doing back then," one cousin admitted. I just smiled and said, "I didn't need you to understand. I just needed space to grow." And that's exactly what I had done. Later that evening, Scott pulled me aside. "I just wanted to say something," he said, rubbing the back of his neck like he used to do when we were kids, and he'd done something wrong. "I know I treated you like garbage for a long time," he said. "I let Mom influence me. I let pride get in the way. But when things got bad, really bad, you still helped me. You didn't have to." I looked at him, surprised by the vulnerability in his voice. "I guess I just want to say thank you. And I'm proud of you, Rachel." That hit harder than I expected. "Thanks," I said softly. "I'm proud of you too, for finally growing up." He chuckled, and for a moment it felt like we were kids again before everything got complicated. As the night came to a close, I stepped outside and looked up at the stars. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. Not because everything was perfect, not because everyone had changed, but because I had. I had chosen myself. I had learned to set boundaries, to say no, to walk away from people, even family when they didn't respect me. And in doing so, I had found strength I didn't know I had. Now, when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the black sheep anymore. I saw a woman who had been underestimated, overlooked, and dismissed, only to rise stronger than anyone ever expected. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their praise. I had found something far more valuable, myself, and that, I realized, was the best kind of victory.